It's story time. The days leading up to Halloween were always my favorite. The crisp autumn air, the colorful leaves, and the anticipation of the spookiest night of the year filled me with excitement. This year, I decided to visit the Halloween Express store, a seasonal emporium of costumes, decorations, and eerie delights. Little did I know that my visit to this store would become a harrowing experience that would haunt my dreams for years to come. As I stepped through the door of Halloween Express, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The store was a cavern of Halloween wonders, with shelves stocked high with masks, costumes, and decorations of every imaginable theme. Ghouls, witches, and skeletons leered at me from every corner, their plastic eyes following my every move. I was drawn to a section of the store filled with life-sized animatronics. A towering Grim Reaper swung his scythe menacingly, and a cackling witch stirred her cauldron with a sinister grin. I marveled at the craftsmanship and creativity that had gone into creating these macabre marvels. As I continued to explore, something caught my eye, a doorway tucked away in the corner of the store, partially concealed by a heavy velvet curtain. The sign above it read, "Enter if you dare, the haunted passage." Intrigued, I pushed aside the curtain and entered the darkened corridor beyond. The air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over me. It was as if I had stepped into another world, one where the boundary between reality and the supernatural blurred. The passage was dimly lit, the walls adorned with tattered drapes and flickering candles that cast eerie shadows. The sound of distant whispers and muffled cries filled the air, and I shivered involuntarily. As I ventured deeper into the haunted passage, the temperature dropped further, and I could see my breath forming ghostly plumes in the chilled air. The atmosphere grew oppressive, and the sense of being watched intensified. It was then that I saw her, a porcelain doll, sitting on a wooden chair in the corner of the passage. She was dressed in an old vintage Victorian gown, her glassy eyes fixed on mine. Her presence sent a chill down my spine, and I couldn't tear my gaze away from her haunting stare. I continued to explore, my heart pounding in my chest, as the passage seemed to stretch on endlessly. It was as if I had entered a labyrinth of horrors, each turn leading me deeper into a nightmarish realm. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper, like a ghostly breath brushing against my ear. I turned, but there was no one there. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from all directions. They spoke of lost souls and eternal torment, their words echoing in the cold, dark corridor. My pulse quickened, and I knew that I had to escape this haunted passage. I retraced my steps, but the corridor seemed to twist and shift, disorienting me. Panic clawed at the edges of my mind as I realized that I was trapped, a prisoner in this chilling labyrinth. As I rounded a corner, I stumbled upon a sight that filled me with dread, a circle of dolls, their eyes all fixed on me, their porcelain faces contorted into malevolent grins. They whispered in unison, their voices a haunting chorus that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to run, to break free from their eerie gaze, but my legs felt like lead. The dolls closed in, their whispers growing louder and more sinister. I felt their icy fingers brush against my skin, and I knew that I was no longer alone in the passage. In a desperate bid for escape, I called out for help, but my voice was drowned out by the relentless whispers of the dolls. I was trapped, ensnared in this nightmarish realm with no hope of rescue. Just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, a blinding light pierced the darkness, and the doll's whispers faded into nothingness. I blinked against the sudden brightness, and when my vision cleared, I found myself back in the main section of the Halloween Express store. The dolls, the haunted passage, and the chilling whispers, all of it had vanished as if it had never been. I was left standing in the midst of the animatronics and costumes, my heart still racing from the ordeal. I stumbled out of the store in a daze, the memory of the haunted passage etched into my mind. It was a Halloween experience unlike any other, one that had left me with a lingering sense of unease. Halloween had always been my favorite time of the year. The costumes, the decorations, and the spooky atmosphere never failed to excite me. So when my mom suggested a visit to the Halloween Express store, I eagerly agreed. As we walked into the store, a rush of excitement surged through me. The shelves were lined with an array of costumes, from ghoulish ghosts to fearsome monsters, and everything in between. Animatronic creatures popped out from corners, their mechanical movements adding to the eerie ambience. My eyes were drawn to a particularly realistic-looking zombie costume. It was tattered and grotesque, with decaying flesh and a hungry look in its hollow eyes. I couldn't resist trying it on. As I slipped into the costume, it felt strangely snug, as though it had been tailored specifically for me. My reflection in the mirror was both impressive and terrifying. The costume was so lifelike that I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. But then, something odd happened. The zombie's head slowly turned toward me, its vacant eyes locking onto mine. I stumbled back, convinced it was some sort of elaborate prank. But the costume didn't stop there. It lunged at me, arms outstretched, and I barely managed to dodge its grasp. "Mom," I yelled, panic taking hold. But when I looked around, I couldn't see her anywhere. The store had transformed, its shelves now filled with costumes that seemed more like malevolent entities than playful dress-up items. The vampire fangs hissed at me, while the witch's broomstick cackled and tried to trip me. I stumbled and fell, narrowly avoiding a giant spider that lunged at me from above. The store had become a nightmare. Props and costumes were coming to life, and I was trapped in this horrifying spectacle. I had to find my mom and get out of there. I crawled between rows of costumes, avoiding the menacing animatronics that seemed intent on my capture. The clown masks leered at me, their painted smiles twisted into sinister grins. It was as if the entire store had turned against me. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I heard a voice. It was faint at first, but it grew louder with each step I took. The voice whispered, beckoning me toward the back of the store. I cautiously followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. It led me to a dimly lit corner where a haunted house setup stood. A chilling fog oozed from the entrance, and eerie music played softly in the background. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and entered the haunted house. The interior was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and hidden traps. I stumbled through darkened rooms, barely escaping from an army of zombies and dodging a guillotine that threatened to slice me in two. The voice grew clearer now, guiding me with eerie precision. It seemed to be leading me deeper into the heart of the haunted house. As I followed its instructions, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was orchestrating this sinister game. Finally, I reached a room that was different from the rest. It was a small, dimly lit chamber with a single spotlight illuminating a pedestal in the center. On the pedestal lay a small, ornate box, intricately decorated with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and writhe. The voice urged me to open the box, promising that it held the key to my escape. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside, I found a glowing amulet, its ethereal light pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Before I could think, I felt a presence behind me. I turned to see a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes gleaming with an eerie light. It reached out for the amulet, but I instinctively snatched it away. A chilling laugh echoed through the room as the figure revealed itself, a sinister sorcerer who had been manipulating the horrors of the store. He explained that the amulet was the source of his power, and he needed it to maintain control over the cursed Halloween Express. With the amulet in my possession, I had a choice to make. I could return it to the sorcerer, allowing him to continue his reign of terror, or I could defy him and break the curse that had ensnared the store. Summoning all my courage, I made my decision. I hurled the amulet toward the ground, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. The sorcerer let out a blood-curdling scream as his power dissipated, and the horrors of the store crumbled away. I found myself back in the Halloween Express, but this time it was as I had remembered it, a place of fun and excitement, with costumes and decorations adorning the shelves. I was no longer under the sorcerer's control, and the store had returned to normal. My mom appeared at my side, concern etched on her face. She had been searching for me, unaware of the nightmare I had experienced. I tried to explain, but the words sounded too fantastical to unbelievable. As we left the store, I couldn't help but glance back one last time. It was as though the Halloween Express had been purged of its malevolence, the curse broken by my defiance. Halloween had always been my favorite holiday. The thrill of dressing up in spooky costumes, the crisp autumn air, and the prospect of a night filled with candy and mischief filled me with excitement each year. This year, I decided to visit the Halloween Express store, a place renowned for its vast selection of costumes and decorations. Little did I know that my trip to the store would turn into a chilling encounter with the cashier. As I entered the Halloween Express store, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The unmistakable scent of rubber masks and plastic props filled the air, and I couldn't help but smile at the sight of aisles upon aisles of costumes. From classic monsters to contemporary pop culture figures, the store offered a treasure trove of possibilities. After much deliberation, I finally settled on a menacing vampire costume complete with a flowing cape and fake fangs. I was eager to try it on and couldn't wait to show it off at our annual Halloween party. With the costume in hand, I made my way to the checkout counter. The store was bustling with shoppers, all eager to snag the perfect costume for the upcoming festivities. I joined the line, my excitement building as I inched closer to the cashier. As I approached the counter, I couldn't help but notice that the cashier was an older woman with striking blue eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. Her silver hair framed her face, and she wore a name tag that read Evelyn. Evelyn greeted me with a warm smile, and I reciprocated with a friendly nod. She began scanning my costume, her movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring every moment of the transaction. Her eyes never left mine, and I couldn't help but feel a growing unease. As she scanned the costume's barcode, she suddenly stopped and stared at me, her piercing blue eyes locking onto mine. The seconds seemed to stretch into an eternity, and I shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Then, in a voice that sent shivers down my spine, Evelyn spoke, her words laced with an eerie intensity. "You know," she said, "Halloween is a night of trick or treating, a night when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest." I nodded, unsure of how to respond to her cryptic statement. She continued, her tone growing even more unsettling. "But do you know the story behind trick or treating? The real story?" I shook my head, genuinely curious despite the unnerving atmosphere that surrounded us. Evelyn leaned in closer, her breath cold against my ear as she whispered her tale. "Long ago," she began, "Halloween was not a night of costumes and candy. It was a night when the dead would return to the realm of the living. Villagers would light bonfires to ward off malevolent spirits and offer sacrifices to appease the restless souls." Evelyn's words hung in the air, and I felt a chill run down my spine. She continued her eerie narrative, her eyes never leaving mine. But there was one spirit, a vengeful soul, who craved more than just offerings. This spirit sought to take the souls of the living, to trap them in a never-ending night of torment. I listened, captivated by her unsettling tale. Evelyn's voice grew more haunting as she spoke of the spirit's insatiable hunger for souls. To protect themselves, the villagers devised a ritual. They would dress in disguises, wearing masks and costumes to hide their true identities. And as they roamed the streets, they would visit each other's homes, offering treats and candies to ward off the spirit. My heart raced as Evelyn's story took a darker turn. But the spirit was cunning, she continued. It would roam the streets in search of unsuspecting victims. And when it found them, it would whisper their names, luring them away from the safety of their homes and into the darkness. Evelyn's tale seemed to consume me, and I couldn't tear my gaze away from her. She leaned even closer, her voice a chilling whisper. "And do you know what happened to those who were lured away?" I shook my head, my voice caught in my throat. "They were never seen again," she said, her eyes gleaming with an eerie intensity. "Their souls were claimed by the vengeful spirit, doomed to wander the night for all eternity." I felt a growing sense of dread as Evelyn's story reached its conclusion. "So, my dear," she said, her tone dripping with malevolence, "when you go out trick or treating on Halloween night, remember that not all spirits are benevolent, and beware the whispers in the dark." With that, Evelyn handed me my costume and wished me a chillingly pleasant Halloween. I left the store, my mind reeling from the encounter with the cashier. Her eerie tale had cast a shadow over the holiday I had always loved, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than me.